there is a growing, let's say, expectation that there will be some kind of big peace summit before Inauguration Day. And before the election, Saudi Arabia was going to step forward. And in that summit, they were going to have Russia and also China at the negotiating table along with Ukraine. So what has to happen there if such a summit takes place or negotiation, whatever, is number one, of course, land needs to be discussed. What is going to happen with the occupied territories? But number two, and very, very importantly, security guarantees. If some kind of lines are agreed to, who is going to be the guarantor of that? Is it going to be Turkey? Is it going to be a number of countries? Because at the end of the day, that country or that group of countries will be on the hook to step in and defend Ukraine should Russia not honor its commitments. And it has a very good, well-deserved reputation for not honoring its commitments.
Hello and welcome to Frontline for Times Radio with me, Kate Gerbeau. And today we are talking to a Ukraine-based global affairs analyst with more than 2 decades experience in humanitarian work and international journalism. Michael Bociurkiw is a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council and has been a spokesman for the Organisation for Security and Cooperation in Europe. He's also an author and a regular commentator for many international media outlets, including Frontline. Michael, great to see you again. Welcome back. You are in Kyiv, which has come under heavy attack this week by drone and missile. How are things in the capital and other parts of Ukraine, like Zaporizhzhia, which have also been targeted?
Right. Great to be with you. Well, it's pretty bad. If there were any hopes or fantasies here among the general population that a calm would come following the victory of Donald Trump, well, that has gone completely out the window. In fact, it's gotten a lot worse. In the last wave of missiles and drones, there were many, many missiles, ballistic missiles, and I believe up to 70 or 80 drones. That's a lot. And of course, when you send that amount of firepower over and they take kind of circuitous routes and whatever, the alarms go over along the whole country. But also it's very, very difficult to bring them down. And even when these missiles are successfully intercepted by air defense systems, they have to fall somewhere, and often they fall in heavy populated areas. But you're right, you mentioned Zaporizhzhia, very, very badly hit. And let's remind everyone that that is the area where Europe's biggest nuclear power plant is located. But I really, Kate, really feel for the people of Kharkiv, the second biggest city in Ukraine, of course, closer to the Russian border, almost targeted on a daily basis, and not mostly with drones, but with fast missiles that evade air defense systems, and people don't have a chance to hide. A big part of the city is being destroyed. And I noticed being in Kyiv these past few days, looking at license plates and people's accents and things like that, that there are a lot of people here from the east seeking shelter, seeking jobs, that sort of thing. And another quick side story happening that I've noticed here too is that there's a lot of talk right now about the mobilization efforts. There just aren't enough infantry, not enough men at the front lines or with the Ukrainians in Kursk, that area in Russia they occupied. And talking to small business owners here, they've seen a drop in business because a lot of men are said to be sitting at home trying to evade detection by the kind of roving teams of draft officers. And that's caused a kind of knock-on problem as well. So it's a problem not only at the front line, but also for the Ukrainian economy here as well.
Yeah, and you, as you say, you are in Kyiv. I'm just wondering, you say that you mention other parts of the country where it is more intense, but what effect is it actually having on daily life there at the moment? I mean, just before we started talking now in this recording, you were describing the kind of chaos it's creating. Can you just tell me what is actually happening?
Yeah, well, in the past 48 hours, we've received quite a barrage, one during the morning rush hour and one during the evening rush hour. So you have this complete chaos happening because you have people trying to go to and from work. And at the same time, the subways have a double purpose as bomb shelters because they're very, very deep under the streets. So you also have people sheltering there, children sheltering there, kids doing their homework. It creates a lot of chaos. Trains were stopped the day before yesterday during rush hour. So even more chaos. But, I talked to a mother of she has 3 or 4 kids the other day, and she said it's very, very difficult to get sleep. And, my children go to work tired. I go to work tired because you never know the severity of these alarms. And we noticed as well that there's also a heightened alarm that goes off that really sends your phone going off very loudly. And those seem to be happening more frequently as well. Having said that, I mean, I was in a bookshop the other day where the heightened alarm went off, and people just, they'll check their Telegram channel to see what's going on, but they are trying to get along with their lives as much as possible. But absolutely underneath, it's causing a lot of disruption, a lot of anxiety. I am seeing some small business owners leave Ukraine who I never thought would leave. And I remind you that I think it's in 4 days we reach the 1,000-day mark of this war, of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. That's a long time to be putting up with what's happening.
Yeah, it is a very sobering date, that is. And what fear is there where you are that these recent attacks are the start of a new wave?
There's reports from officials that the Russians are gearing up for a massive missile attack that they've been stockpiling. And of course, Mr. Putin has the benefits of being friends with the leaders in Tehran and in Pyongyang, and they're supplying him with missiles and munitions, and in North Korea's case, thousands and thousands of soldiers. So the war economy has been put in place in Russia quite some time ago, so they're gearing up for mass production of more missiles. So there's a lot to be sent this way. Now, which goal that will achieve for the Kremlin, I don't know, but I can tell you that the Kremlin playbook would be that you fire and fire and fire, you wear people down, you displace them, and that perhaps in the hopes that this will put pressure from the people on the Zelensky administration to run for the negotiating table. But a poll the other day by the International Republican Institute indicated that a lot of Ukrainians still want the government to press on, to push Mr. Putin back. But the numbers seem to be falling a bit. And, I don't think any of us can dispute the fact that President Zelensky, who came into government with absolutely no political training, has been a fantastic wartime president. But having said that, I do run into a lot of people who have their doubts about him now. And that's an interesting thing to track. One more thing, Kate, is that as we count down the days to the inauguration of Donald Trump, it's still hard to believe, but it is happening, that a lot of Ukrainians are waiting for the Biden administration to act on the rhetoric that we are for Ukraine, we will defend it as long as we can, to do the one thing they want right now, and that is to give the green light for the Ukrainian armed forces to use Anglo-French missiles to strike deeper into Russia at the very launch pads where these drones and missiles are coming from. That has not come yet. I suspect it still may, because I have a feeling that President Biden in these days left will want to somehow solidify his foreign affairs legacy. And one would think that by now it would have sunk into his head that a lot of the bluster that's coming from Mr. Putin is bluffing, that no, he's not going to use tactical nuclear weapons. And even if he does escalate, well, what are we in right now? This is an escalation of what's happening, these daily attacks. So we may still see that coming, but in a very quiet way for Ukraine to use those missiles deeper into Russia.
There have been some interesting comments in the last day, which the Institute for the Study of War has said appears to indicate that President Putin is trying to set the terms of any peace negotiations. The Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman said peace can only be achieved when the West stops providing military assistance. And then the Russian Foreign Minister has said that the start of Trump's presidency would not fundamentally change the US position, and that any proposals to freeze the front line were even worse than the Minsk agreements. What do you make of those comments? Do we take them at face value, or are they trying to push? Are they confident they can make gains before Donald Trump is inaugurated, or what does it signify in the thinking, do you think?
Well, first of all, I don't believe a word that comes out of the mouths of Kremlin spokespersons or ministers. And secondly, let's roll back the timeline a little bit and remember who started this war, this unprovoked war. It was Russia. So who are they to dictate the terms? They're still spinning the narrative, not only at home, but in overseas fora through Russia Today and other channels that they came here to rescue Russian-speaking Ukrainians and that, Russia itself was threatened. Well, no, it was the other way around. So there's no desire here whatsoever to give up territory. Number two is that there's more and more reliable reporting coming out of occupied territories in Donetsk, Luhansk, and elsewhere that of the conditions of people there living under Russian occupation. And in one line, it's described as hell on earth. So Ukrainians know that not only from these current reports but also from reports from their grandparents of what it is like to live under, to Russia. So that's driving a lot of the resistance here. But I do think that there is a growing, let's say, expectation that there will be some kind of big peace summit before Inauguration Day. And before the election, Saudi Arabia was going to step forward. And in that summit, they were going to have Russia and also China at the negotiating table along with Ukraine. So what has to happen there if such a summit takes place or negotiation, whatever, is number one, of course, land needs to be discussed. What is going to happen with the occupied territories? But number two, and very, very importantly, security guarantees. If some kind of lines are agreed to, who is going to be the guarantor of that? Is it going to be Turkey? Is it going to be a number of countries? Because at the end of the day, that country or that group of countries will be on the hook to step in and defend Ukraine should Russia not honor its commitments. And it has a very good, well-deserved reputation for not honoring its commitments. I know this myself, being here 2014, 2015 with the OSCE. Many agreements, many red lines were established which Russia did not follow. So that's going to be very important. And thirdly is going to be discussions over justice, war crimes, return of exchange of POWs. And then fourthly, another big ticket item, but it's kind of a low-hanging fruit item, which is already being discussed now, is reconstruction of Ukraine. I think we're north of $750 billion right now in terms of what it will take to rebuild Ukraine. So there's a lot on the table right now to be discussed. It's very complicated, but at the end of the day, at this very moment in time, we see very little meeting of minds between what Kyiv wants and what Moscow wants, and how that's resolved, I just don't know.
Yes, on an emergency visit to Brussels, the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, he met NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, and he said the Biden administration had plans to increase military assistance to Ukraine in the final months of its term, expedite more than $6 billion of funding already appropriated for military support. But I know you mentioned that there could be some movement on the permission to use storm shadows to strike deep into Russia. But there are limitations on how much President Biden can do in the remaining weeks, aren't there?
You're right. And I did listen into the press conference day before yesterday of the Pentagon spokesperson. He did enumerate what is left under the Presidential Drawdown Authority and other monies that have been committed. It is in the billions of dollars, but it's something that Ukraine will blow through pretty quickly, because we are hearing credible reports from the front lines of lack of kit, lack of munitions, and, as I mentioned, lack of personnel. But the Pentagon did pledge to move everything as quickly as possible. But having said that, I mean, there's only so much stuff that is sitting on shelves in the United States. There's only so much output that can come out of munitions factories, for example, like the one in Pennsylvania that President Zelensky visited in September. And there are other commitments, Israel being a big one, what's going on in the Red Sea, and the United States has to honor commitments in Indo-Pacific as well. So that is a big constraint. There is some silver lining here, is the United States did stump up the change I believe to the tune of $20 billion to back a European effort to get to Ukraine the interest off of those frozen Russian sovereign assets sitting in European banks. That's something that has been spun as future-proofing or Trump-proofing Ukraine aid, should Mr. Trump get in. So that was a very, very good thing. There was a lot of anxiety in some European capitals of what that move might do to the reputation of the euro and so on. But that was a really good move. And I think it signaled to Ukrainians that Europe especially is going to be their next kind of big backer should Mr. Trump want to reduce aid to Ukraine.
If we just have a little look at what President-elect Donald Trump's initial choices are in terms of appointments, what are the ones that you are interested that can give us an indication of his attitude and his policy towards Ukraine and the war?
Well, it's pretty mind-boggling, and it raises the question of what kind of how do these folks in the Trump and the MAGA circle view the institutions of the White House, of the Pentagon, and so on. The recent pick for the Justice Department, for instance, signals that he's appointing loyalists who have absolutely no qualifications, but he can rely on them to be his kind of pit bull to go after opponents or those who have crossed over the line in his mind, in his warped mind. But there are, we really expected, for example, former Secretary of State and CIA Director Mike Pompeo to come into the administration. We thought Nikki Haley would come in, but those have been crossed out. But the Mark Rubio has been apparently chosen as Secretary of State. And I think that's a fairly good choice, all things considered, because the big fear, of course, running up to the election and fears of another Trump presidency is that most of the responsible grown-ups in the room have either fled or been crossed off of any Trump list. So who are you going to pick from? But there's quite a few more. And let's not forget that a lot of these picks have to go through Congress, through the Senate. I am also wondering, for example, what's going to happen to the U.S. ambassador here in Kyiv. She's not regarded as very strong, close to Mr. Biden. I think you'll see a replacement there. And then also, interestingly, Kate, in terms of new appointments, I think we're going to see a change of faces at the Ukrainian embassy in Washington, a very, very, very key post. Oksana Makarova, who has become very well known to folks in the United States over the course of the war, has been very harshly criticized by the Trump people for Mr. Zelensky's last visit to the United States. So I think we'll see a new appointment there. But there is actually criticism of how Team Zelensky or Team Ukraine are handling the transition right now. We don't see many of their faces on Fox or the other big networks or down in Mar-a-Lago lobbying for more Ukraine aid. So that's a bit of a concern as well.
And why is that not happening?
Well, I think the last time you and I spoke, it was around the time that Foreign Affairs Minister Dmytro Kuleba was ousted out of his post, very highly regarded, very impressive, very articulate. And, I would never for 1 second compare the Zelensky administration to the Trump administration, but there is a sense here that at the end of the day, the big thing that counts here is loyalty, sometimes over skill, over track record. And I think that's what happened with Mr. Kuleba, sadly. Instead, they appointed one of his junior deputies, who is best known for rising up early in the morning when second-grade foreign affairs minister would come to Kyiv and he'd present a bouquet of flowers or whatever to the arriving train. So, he's hardly as articulate as Mr. Kuleba. So I think they're fumbling on a key area right now. And, even at the beginning of the Zelensky administration, they did get rid of or they ignored a lot of really, really effective technocrats who were in place there. So, at the end of the day, you have to play with the cards you have. But I think some of this was kind of self-inflicted pain what they're facing right now.
Just two appointments I wanted just to ask for your thoughts on. by President-elect Donald Trump. Just to get your thoughts on Tulsi Gabbard, his choice as Director of National Intelligence, quite an interesting one in her stance on foreign policy, because when Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, she claimed it could have been avoided if the Biden administration and NATO had acknowledged Russia's legitimate security concerns about NATO. I mean, people say things sometimes, and when they actually get the job, they change their stance. But does this tell us anything about Trump's attitude towards President Putin and the kind of claims he makes?
Well, I can't get too specific about her track record because I'm not familiar with her, but she does fit into this narrative that is spun by people like the vice president-elect and others in the Trump camp that, yeah, it was the West that provoked this war because the West, members of NATO, wanted to push the NATO boundaries right up to Russia. And by doing so, as the argument goes, is that they provoked Mr. Putin because, one could argue that there was no way he could have NATO's eastern borders right up against Russia's. But, it's already close anyway. If we'll look at, the Baltic states, that area, Scandinavia. And I think this is an inevitability. And it is, for example, in Ukraine's constitution that Ukraine is going to pursue a path to NATO. So it's hard to say where they would go with this. I think you're right, is that once in their office and they receive the proper briefings, and hopefully they won't fire the entire bureaucracy and they'll get good advice, that their eyes will open and see what's really going on. And I think, hopefully they'll come and visit Ukraine. In fact, President Zelensky invited Mr. Trump here to see what is really going on, because briefings are one thing, but once you come here and you see how people feel, the damage, the displacement, and so on, it really does open up your eyes, especially the degree of war crimes that are going on right now on the Russian side. So let's see what happens. But there's also a kind of habit among Mr. Trump and his circle to say things one day, they're challenged with it the next day, and then they deny saying it. And that's a problem too right now, because they'll blame the fake news on all sorts of things. It's going to be a real circus, I think, in the next coming years. We'll see.
If we could just talk for a moment about what you're hearing from the front lines, those returning from them, what are they telling you about the pressures they're facing in terms of the manpower and equipment, and what effect is the high demand for infantry soldiers really having?
Well, I go on information I receive from friends of mine who are in humanitarian aid or helping the armed forces go to the front line, and also foreign correspondents who come back from there. And the number one problem seems to be infantry, the lack of soldiers, the lack of replacement. You have a lot of soldiers there, and the first wave were experienced but more advanced in age, who have been there with very little rotation. And they're very, very tired, and they're under a lot of fire. I believe the target for recruitment right now is 150,000 or so. Probably they'll get 100,000. But as I mentioned earlier, there is quite a bit of resistance, or let's call it unwillingness, for young people to go to the front line and fight. But I think, I can't speak for ordinary Ukrainians, but perhaps the message here should be ramped up to ordinary Ukrainians and to those who have left the country, is that this is an existential fight for the country, and all hands on deck. Every possible individual is needed to fight. But, the other problem is, Kate, is that if you're sent to the front line and you don't have the proper kit to fire back at the Russians or to defend yourself, well, that could cause anxiety and fears as well. And the rate
I heard someone saying about that. It's not that morale is low and that people don't want to fight. It's that they just want to have the equipment to be able to do so, and they're prepared to do so. It's more that.
Exactly. Yeah, but Ukraine has had an incredible track record. I mean, with basically no navy, they've been able to sink 1/3, if not more, of Russia's Black Sea fleet. with this drone technology, and a lot of these drones that, for example, closed down Moscow airports the other day, they're manufactured right here, and they have incredible range, incredible firepower. So let's not forget, I mean, the wars of today are also turning into technology wars or hybrid wars. And Ukraine is really, really strong on that front. A lot of technology experts and talent here who have not left or who are working remotely and helping the war effort. And, you know, I mentioned the hybrid war effort. I should also say that I am flabbergasted at how little resources, how little effort European countries are doing to push back Mr. Putin or punish him for the shenanigans that are happening where you are in the United Kingdom or on European soil, from poisoning or killing people, whether it's in the United Kingdom or Spain, with with military grade means, or by causing havoc. For example, in the United Kingdom, there was a warehouse used by Ukrainians that was burnt down, meddling in elections, misinformation on a very, very wide scale. And I know the European leaders in Brussels have raised the alarm on this, but it's not enough just to raise the alarm or complain about it. You have to back it up with actions and with money. And to end this point, I think one thing, and I've said this probably a million times, including with you, is the only one thing that Mr. Putin understands is strength. So, you know, the EU or its allies may commit a certain amount of money, but Mr. Putin can snap his fingers and double or triple that. So more resources have to be put aside to fight this Russian hybrid war. Otherwise, the Russian war effort will come much, much more to the doorsteps of ordinary folks in the United Kingdom or anywhere in Europe.
And I know that you've been thinking a lot about the wider consequences of the war in Ukraine. And North Korea has this week ratified its defence pact with Russia. What are the potential ramifications of the deal to have consequences far beyond Ukraine's borders?
Well, let me be very blunt. This is now a global war. This is a globalized war. It has been for quite some time. Let's not forget the role of Iran in providing the deadly drones that are striking Kyiv and other Ukrainian cities on a daily basis. And yes, the North Koreans have been providing lots and lots of ammo to the Russians and missiles as well. We know that because the Ukrainians pick up the pieces and they see the markings of North Korea on there. And then in addition to the estimated 10,000 North Korean soldiers joining Russians in the battle for the return of Kursk. I just read a report this morning that probably there's 20,000 more on their way from DPRK. They do not have modern battlefield experience, and they are receiving Russian training in the Russian Far East. I don't know how much that will work out for them, because we see the meat grinder that is happening. I think the latest figure is 1,400 Russian dead and injured every day. So those North Koreans could be returning home in boxes. But imagine for a moment that if thousands of them do survive and go back to DPRK, what kind of threat does that pose to peace in the Indo-Pacific region? People have to start thinking about that as well. People have to start thinking about, what is Russia offering in return to Tehran and to Pyongyang for their assistance? Is it nuclear technology, not only money? So I think this is also a call for countries that have been sitting on the fence, that feel they're far away from this conflict, like India, like Japan, like South Korea. I just noticed the other day, Taiwan has donated a lot of missile defense batteries to Kyiv as well. These are US-made kit. So once again, I mean, by this war becoming so globalized, it is going to hit these countries sooner or later. One more point is, as you well know, for the longest time, Russia has been constraining the flow of food from where I live, Odessa port, to the world, including to some very, very needy countries. About 2 weeks ago, there were no ships waiting to enter Odessa. It's the first time I've seen that for a long, long time. Apparently, ship owners were tipped off that the Russians are going to send more missiles to the Odessa region, and they fled unloaded. It didn't get widely reported, but I saw it with my very own eyes. So President Zelensky once said is, why is it that a small group of men in the Kremlin are able to dictate what we eat at our dinner tables or how much we pay for it? And then one more thing, if foreign reporting is to be believed, Russians have also been providing targeting information to the Iran-backed Houthi rebels to strike commercial ships in the Red Sea, a key trade artery. Why is there no more screaming about that? These are very, very provocative, disruptive actions on the part of the Kremlin.
And just, Michael, finally, in the coming days and weeks, what are you going to be focusing your attention on? What are you going to be looking out for?
Yeah, aside from the kind of smaller things, new appointments from the US, but also the Ukrainian side, is that very, very big one ask from the Ukrainians is whether the permission to use Storm Shuttle missiles will be acted upon for Ukraine to strike deeper into Russia. I think that's really crucial. I think we're also going to be watching what happens in Europe. The president of Finland has come out quite strongly saying that we have to help Ukraine with these negotiations to decide things about land and over security guarantees, the reparations and the reconstruction. There's going to be a lot more huddling going on between European leaders. Of course, you have people like Hungary's Orban on the side saying, no, we have to negotiate with Russia. It'll be interesting to see whether he's going to be the peace whisperer to Mr. Trump as well, given their relationship. So this is something I've predicted for quite some time, is that more and more the responsibility for helping Ukraine push back Mr. Putin will fall on European shoulders, and even more so on nearby neighbors like Poland, like the Baltic states. Of course, they don't have the financial heft, military heft that the US can provide. But, like I said earlier, I think other countries which have a lot of ability to provide weaponry and financial assistance, for example, India, need to come and step up to the plate, because day by day, Kate, this is becoming much, much more of a globalized war. And I think Mr. Modi and others are deluding themselves if they think that this hybrid, this terroristic actions by Mr. Putin is not going to affect their economies.
Appreciate you spending some time with us. Michael Bociurkiw, thank you very much.
As always, a pleasure. Thank you.
You've been watching Frontline for Times Radio with me, Kate Gerbeau. If you'd like to be the first to get exclusive content, you can sign up for membership with the link below. You can also listen to Times Radio for the latest news or read it on thetimes.com. My thanks to our producer today, Louis Sykes, and to you for watching. Bye for now.